or seen anything about this case or had any contact with the case outside of court? If you have, would you raise your hand? And seeing no hands raised, I find the jury remains indifferent. And you all got through the blizzard this morning to get here. I thank you for being here and being here again as promptly as you all have been. And I apologize for the delay this morning in getting started. I've been attending to some issues with counsel. But we're ready to resume the testimony. I think we have a detective on the witness stand. Before we resume, however, I want to comment on one witness who testified yesterday, and that was Mr. Sanchez. And Mr. Sanchez provided testimony to you folks, including referencing the skin color of the person he says he saw in the automobile and comparing that skin color. Please understand, one of the elements, one of the things the Commonwealth must prove beyond a reasonable doubt in any case is the identity of the perpetrator of the crime. In this case, the Commonwealth must prove that this defendant, Aaron Hernandez, was in fact the perpetrator of this crime, and they must prove that beyond a reasonable doubt. That is an essential element of each of the separate crimes in this case. And please understand, with regard to the testimony of Rashides Sanchez, Mr. Sanchez did not identify anyone as the perpetrator of this crime. And to the extent any juror viewed his testimony as constituting an in-court identification or any identification, disregard that. That was not what he actually said. The testimony of Mr. Sanchez was comparative in nature, but does not constitute any identification that Mr. Hernandez was an occupant of the Toyota 4Runner at the time of this shooting. All right, let us turn to the continuation of testimony. We have Detective Cummings, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Watch it. May I inquire, Your Honor?
You may, Mr. Hagan.
Thank you. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Would you please reintroduce yourself to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury?
Detective Joshua Cummings, Cummings.
Detective Cummings, before we took the afternoon break, you had testified about a few things, and one of the things was the investigation that you had done a couple months prior to July 2012, that one being the April 2012 homicide that occurred at the parking lot next to the Tufts Medical Center garage. You recall that testimony?
Yes, sir.
All right, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Just showing you now, Detective, Exhibit 186. I believe yesterday I had asked you to write on Exhibit 186 the date of that homicide. And I noticed it says April 2002 with the initials JC. Is that accurate, or is there something inaccurate?
No, the year's wrong. It's 2012.
And similarly, Detective, I'm going to show you another photograph. And ask you if you recognize this photograph, sir.
I do.
And is that a fair and accurate representation, another photograph of the crime scene back in April 2012 for that same incident of April 2012?
It is.
And does that photograph give a little bit better rendering or depiction of that parking lot in relation to the Tufts Medical Center garage?
Yes.
Your Honor, ask that the next photograph be entered as Exhibit 186A, and we'll have it stapled to 186 if that's agreeable.
No, without objection, that is received.
Place Exhibit 186 on the screen first, as we didn't publish these to the jury yesterday. And just to clarify, this is from April of 2012, correct?
Correct.
And this building here, sir, what is that?
That's the Tufts Garage.
And up here past where it says city, where's Cure Nightclub in relation to that?
It'd be on that corner, down at the end of the
Corner here?
photo. Yes.
And the parking lot here, is this the incident, the location where the homicide in April occurred?
It's inside that parking lot, yes.
Please see on the screen exhibit number 186A that we just introduced. Again, does that show where the parking lot is in relation to the parking garage?
Yes.
And just to clarify, sir, based upon your video canvas that you described yesterday doing after the July 16th, 2012 homicides, did you determine whether there was any video footage, video surveillance cameras that were affixed to any of the areas that are depicted in these photographs?
There were not.
Now, Detective, calling your attention to some other testimony that we touched upon yesterday before taking the break. You indicated that you were, in fact, successful in getting video surveillance footage from the Tufts Medical Center garage. Is that correct?
Yes.
And did that video footage include the floating plaza looking at Tremont Street as well as the entrance and exits of the garage?
Yes.
And additionally, sir, I think right before we broke, I asked you about whether or not you obtained or were able to view any video surveillance footage from Club Cure from the night of July 15th, 2012 into the 16th of 2012. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And were you able to obtain...
Objection, Judge. This has been ruled on by the board. Talbot issue.
I'll see you at sidebar.
detectives on this homicide, did you review that footage from Club Cure and from the Tufts Medical Center garage?
Initially, I was assigned to do Club Cure.
Club Cure. And we'll get into Club Cure in a second, Detective. Just calling your attention to your practice, yours specifically, back in 2012 as a homicide unit detective. What was your practice relative to video surveillance footage from businesses, private businesses?
We would request it.
And your practice in 2012, would you request certain parts of video footage or all of it?
In its entirety.
What do you mean by that?
We would ask for any footage from any cameras available. We would also ask for, we would develop a time frame, particularly a place like Cure. It would be from open to close.
And did you ever recall in the course of your career as a homicide detective deviating from that practice of obtaining any and all cameras from the relevant time periods?
No.
Would there be any investigative purpose in only asking for certain video footage?
Only in regards to time frame. If you had a 24-hour store, we wouldn't likely ask for 24 hours of footage for an incident that happened at 10 p.m. We may say, I'd like 4 hours before to 4 hours after. But that would be the time where you would limit a time frame.
So it would only limit time frame. Would you ever limit areas that are covered by cameras?
No.
Detective Cummings, you had an opportunity back in 2012 and then more recently to review video footage reportedly from Cure and from the Tufts Medical Center garage, correct?
Yes.
And are you aware of the contents of a thumb drive that I have here labeled as Detective Cummings?
Yes.
Does that contain a compilation of video from Club Cure and from the Tufts Medical Center garage from July 15th into the 16th of 2012?
Yes.
Your Honor, the thumb drive compilation, again, does the next number exhibit?
No objections.
187? Exhibit 187.
Now, Detective Cummings, you indicated that part of your initial role when you started to investigate this case was to review the Cure footage. Is that correct?
Yes.
And Detective, when you reviewed the Cure footage, what, if anything, did you focus on? In other words, were you looking for the individuals entering, exiting, both? What were you looking for?
We were looking for what the video could tell us, so that would include both.
Now, Detective Cummings, while I'm getting the video to boot up, so to speak, can you tell what you recall looking at from the video footage first, and what, if anything, you took note of?
We had the entrance way, we had the card reader system, we had some video from outside. We did notice that we didn't have anything from anywhere else in the club at that time. We also noticed that the time frame we were given was less than what we needed.
Explain those two things. You noticed that you didn't have all of the footage, and you didn't notice the time. You didn't think you had the right time frames. Tell us what you mean.
I believe that initially the time frame we had started at midnight, knowing the club, I believe, opened at 10. That's what we had asked for. And the only cameras we had were either outside or upstairs. There was nothing from downstairs.
Also, I'm sorry, I'm going to object to this witness testifying to hearsay.
Overruled.
So when you viewed all of the well, see if we can get a time frame, Detective, and I realize you may not have the exact, but about how long was it before you got the cure footage?
I believe it was 2 to 3 days.
And the footage from Tufts Medical Center, about how long was it before you got that?
I believe about the same time. I didn't pick that up, so I don't know the day that it was picked up or dropped off.
And relative to the club cure footage, you indicated that at some point you had a chance to start reviewing it, and you noticed the two things you just testified about. How long was it before you noticed that there appeared to be cameras missing?
When we first started to look at it, because the start times, and I believe these were fragmented in sections, the start time was midnight, and there was nothing before that. But we did know that the club was actually open prior to that.
And what was your understanding as to when the club opened that night, Sunday night?
I believe it's 10 p.m.
And at that point, you realized you only had video from midnight on?
Yes.
Now, relative to, you said missing cameras, or you indicated that you didn't have the downstairs. Were you part of conversations about the fact that you didn't seem to have the downstairs cameras?
Within my squad, yes. With members of CURE, no.
And within the members of your squad, did you convey that you needed more cameras from downstairs?
Yes.
And did you specifically request that from other members of your squad?
I informed Sergeant Detective Sullivan, who was in contact with Sergeant Detective Talbot and the people from CURE, that it appeared we didn't have all of the footage.
And following your inquiries for additional footage, let's start first with the additional footage relative to the time frame. What was the additional time frame you wanted? And you may have already answered this, and if you did, I apologize. But the additional time frame that you wanted was what?
10 p.m. when it opened. I believe on the back end, I think it goes till about 3 a.m. That was sufficient, but we didn't have the beginning of the night.
And did you ultimately receive footage that covered from 10 p.m. until midnight?
Yes.
And did you receive that footage for the same cameras for which you had previously obtained from CURE?
Yes.
And in particular to the purpose, one of the purposes for wanting the video footage from 10 to midnight, let me back up for a second. What was your understanding as to, and we can show on the video, what was your understanding as to when the victims arrived at the club?
They arrive at almost 12:30.
So your purpose in obtaining video footage from at least certain areas from 10 to 12 was what, Detective?
Because that's when it opened and patrons started to enter.
So was your purpose to try to identify all patrons that were even present in Club CURE that night?
Not necessarily to identify, but to look at it. Initially, we have them entering at 12:30. One of the things that we look at is, did someone else that we recognize come in before that? We didn't have the footage, so we wouldn't have known.
So at some point you did receive additional footage from CURE to cover 10 p.m. to midnight, correct?
Yes.
Were you ever successful in obtaining additional footage from CURE for the downstairs cameras?
No.
And did you ever determine or receive an indication as to why?
Objection, Judge, also hearsay.
Well, that may be answered yes or no.
Just yes or no, sir.
Could you ask the question again,
Did
please?
you ever obtain an answer or an indication as to why you couldn't get the downstairs video?
Yes.
Now, Detective, I'm going to play a portion of exhibit number. What exhibit number was that, Nancy?
187.
187, thank you. for the record, I'm stopping Exhibit 187 at 4 minutes and 27 seconds. When you watched the video, Detective, were you able to identify the victims, the persons who were in the BMW when the car was shot?
Yes.
And what we see here on the video at about 12:30 cure time, did you recognize those individuals? Did you determine who they were?
Yes.
And did you determine them to be occupants of the car?
Yes.
Now, Detective, calling your attention now to 5 minutes and 5 seconds into Exhibit 187. The time is 12:30 and 37. When you watched the video, and this is back in July of 2012, did you make any note of an individual that we now see walking into the club?
Yes.
And what did you write in your notes, if you recall?
I believe I identified someone who came in. There was a male and a female when the victims came in, and what I described at the time as a white male with tattoos.
And following conversations with other members of your squad, were you able to, at least from your own knowledge, identify that person who you saw walking in?
Sergeant Detective Sullivan recognized him.
And after you looked at him and then drew on your own memory, did you ultimately recognize him with a little help from Sergeant Detective Sullivan?
Yes.
Who did you recognize him to be?
Aaron Hernandez.
And Detective, describe for ladies and gentlemen of the jury, as you're watching the video of the victims entering the club, what were you looking for from an investigator standpoint?
We had very little information at this time. We were actually looking for anything. It's not a question of my being aware of looking for something specific. We were looking for something that would aid in the investigation. So we were looking at what was going on with them when they go into the club, but I can't say that I was looking for something specific.
And Detective, calling upon, again, not necessarily the truth of what's said, but your investigative mindset, were you aware of anything at this point that had occurred downstairs in Club Cure? Any altercations or anything?
No.
And that had included your knowledge from your interviews with the surviving victims of the car, is that correct?
Yes.
And you had no indication of anything happening inside the club?
No.
At some point, Detective, did your focus, or at least your review of the investigation, did that turn towards observing the victims when they exited the club in an effort to determine some investigative material?
Yes.
And when the victims exited the club, sir, did you watch that video?
Yes.
And just for the record, I have the Exhibit 187 at 14 minutes 24 seconds, and the time is about 2:11 a.m. Relative to the Cure Club camera time. And you watched all of this in July of 2012, sir?
Yes.
What were you looking for in particular, if anything?
Again, the movements of the victims, and to see if there was any indication, pretty much of anything on these videos. They leave, they appear to mill about. There just doesn't appear to be anything of substance or something to follow on based on their interactions. Largely, other than there's a moment when Mr. Abreu interacts with someone, they appear to be interacting largely with each other.
And I'm calling your attention now forwarded to 1724, and that's 2:14 on cure time. You indicated that in your investigation you did see one of the victims interacting with a woman, is that correct?
Yes.
Is that what we see on the screen here?
Yes.
Did that get your attention from an investigative standpoint?
It was something to follow up on, yes.
What did you do to follow up on what you see in the video here, Exhibit 187, back in 2012, July?
We attempted to identify the unknown woman.
Were you successful in doing so?
Yes.
How were you able to identify her?
We went back through the card reader system. We noted what time she entered. She had placed an ID on the card reader system. That's how we got her name.
And did you and or other detectives ultimately interview that woman?
Yes.
What was her name?
Paige Aiello.
In addition to interviewing Paige Aiello, detective, did you also attempt to ascertain the identity of other people you saw Paige Aiello interacting with?
Yes.
And what did you do in that regard?
Simply, we asked her. She had mentioned that a friend of hers had come and she interacted with him later. His name was Brian Schmidt.
Did you conduct an interview with Brian Schmidt?
Yes.
And What was Brian Schmidt's ethnicity?
A white male.
And did you make any observations or do any follow-up relative to Mr. Schmidt and his motor vehicle?
Yes.
Describe that, please.
Mr. Schmidt has a silver, I think, Mercedes SUV. We became aware of that. We talked to him, and he was ruled out.
And again, from an investigative perspective, not necessarily that it's accurate, based upon the information you had thus far in the investigation, what were you looking for possible suspects and suspect vehicle?
A silver SUV. We had a couple different descriptions on what the make of that SUV might have been. That it had Rhode Island plates, and there were varying descriptions from the surviving victims about the description of who was in the car.
Now, Detective, relative to what you just described, the suspect vehicle, at some point did you and other members of your unit study the video from the Tufts Medical Center garage, specifically what they call the floating plaza camera, to determine whether or not you could see a vehicle that matched the description of the suspect vehicle?
Yes.
I'm just placing on the screen what's been entered as exhibit number 29, labeled now as the floating plaza video. Sir, if you would just, to start, what we see here on the screen, and for the record it's at 23:18, which I think in military time converts to 11:18 p.m., is that correct?
Yes, sir.
What we see on the Tufts floating plaza camera appears to be an alleyway.
It's a walkway, yes.
What is it showing, and how, if at all later, does it turn?
It's on a timer. When the clubs are starting to let out, or people would be leaving areas in the theater district, it turns to face Tremont Street, down Tremont towards the Tufts garage.
And does that turning appear to happen? I've now forwarded the floating plaza camera to just about 12:30. At about 12:30, does the camera rotate to cover Tremont Street?
Yes.
And did you and other detectives ultimately watch the pretty much video in its entirety from 12:30 through about 2:35 or 2:40 when the victim's car leaves the garage?
Yes.
Detective, calling your attention now to when the victims in the vehicle appear to leave the garage. We're not stopping, I'll let it play at 12:26 and 11 seconds. Did you determine who the individuals were who were entering a car now on that screen?
Yes.
And who was that?
Kirsten Lopes and Mercedes Sanchez.
They were entering the silver BMW that was the subject car of the shooting?
Yes.
So we're going to fast forward to 12:27 and 58 seconds.
Counsel, you mean 2:27?
I'm sorry, 2:27, 58 seconds. So, Detective, this was approximately a minute and a half to 2 minutes after the victim's car pulled out of the parking garage. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir.
When you were reviewing the video, again, as a detective, you and your fellow detectives with the squad, did this car that we now see in the screen, did that provide some investigative lead for you?
It did.
And what, if anything, did you do relative to this car?
We attempted initially to identify the make and model of the car.
Let me back you up a little bit, Detective. You indicated that you had a certain description of the suspect vehicle being a silver SUV with Rhode Island plates. Were you aware of what at least according to witnesses, the make and model potentially were of that car?
I believe initially it was described as a silver Toyota 4Runner, a silver Nissan Pathfinder, and from the victims, they called it a Toyota Highlander.
And were you aware, at least at that point, not only in your role as a detective, but as a regular civilian, as to whether or not some of those cars appear similar?
They do.
And what, if anything, from an investigative standpoint, did you do with the information? In other words, were you looking only for a Toyota Highlander, Toyota Pathfinder, 4Runner? What were you looking for?
The way that the descriptions and the way that they varied, we were looking for a silver SUV.
I'm calling attention to what the silver SUV that we see on the screen here on Exhibit 29 at 2:27 and 58 seconds. Did you and or other members of your homicide squad take a still of this video here showing this car in an attempt to determine the make and model of the car?
Yes.
Where did you bring that to, if you recall?
Detective McIsaac did this. He was fairly confident from viewing the video that it was a Hyundai Santa Fe.
Judge.
Well sustained.
Dry not being offered for the truth?
All right.
I'll withdraw the objection.
Then overruled. And ladies and gentlemen, let me just explain what that means. We have a principle in the rules of evidence. You probably heard the phrase hearsay. Hearsay is information. It's a statement of a third party made out of court, offered for its truth. And that is not permitted except in limited circumstances. Sometimes, however, evidence is admitted that is an out-of-court statement or out-of-court act that is offered not to prove the truth of what was said, but for some other purpose. In this case, I take it to provide context for a further investigation. So, as to Detective McIsaac's belief that he thought it was a Santa Fe, that is not offered to prove what kind of car it was, but to explain further police activity. Mr. Hagan.
Thank you, Your Honor. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Detective Cummings, I'm going to show you a photograph. It's a little grainy, but do you recognize that, sir?
Yes.
And what do you recognize that to be?
It's one of the stills that was produced from this video.
And in order to get the stills, did you and or other members of your homicide squad take the video to a video expert to have him make these stills?
Yes.
And who was that, sir?
John Green.
Who was he employed by at the time?
At the time, he was an analyst for the FBI.
And with the still photograph that I've placed before you, that is a fair and accurate representation of the vehicle that you started to look at.
We'll stipulate to its submission, Judge.
Your Honor, for the photograph is the next number exhibit.
188.
Placing exhibit 188 on the screen, sir, did you and or other members of your homicide squad take this photograph, this still photograph, exhibit 188, to any Hyundai dealerships in the local Boston area?
Yes.
And as a result of taking the photograph to the Hyundai dealership, were you able to at least presumably identify the make and model of the vehicle?
Yes.
And what was it believed to be?
A Hyundai Santa Fe produced between 2005 and 2007.
Now, with that information, Detective Cummings, of this vehicle being a Hyundai Santa Fe between 2005 and 2007, what, if anything, did you do next from an investigative standpoint?
We made a request to the Rhode Island Registry of Motor Vehicles.
What was that request?
Any and all Hyundai Santa Fe's they had registered in the state of Rhode Island.
Did you ultimately receive a response back from the state of Rhode Island where you received all Hyundai Santa Fe registrations for the state of Rhode Island?
Yes.
Now, what, if anything, did you do to compare that list with other data or information that you had?
That list was compared against the list that was developed from the card reader system at Cure.
Well, describe that. How was there a list developed from the card reader system at Cure?
With the assistance of some of the interns in the DA's office, they went through, and it took them quite some time. The footage of the card reader, they took down the names that they could see, and they produced a list of people who had attended Club Cure that evening.
Detective, describe the card reader system, at least as you determined it, how it worked from watching the card reader video. How did it work?
Patrons would go to the club, present their ID. Card IDs, licenses would be placed under this system. My assumption is that it's not used for verifying that the ID is authentic. I'm sorry, it is used for verifying whether the ID is authentic, not necessarily to track the people coming in and out of the club.
Why do you say that?
Because not everybody has to do it, and if you use a passport, it's too big to go under it. Those patrons, their IDs are viewed, and they're still allowed entry.
And as far as the painstaking, I think, as you described it, or time-consuming process, is it an automatic system where once the ID is placed in, it will snap a picture, or is it a continuously running video that just records what's being placed there?
It's a rolling video.
And does it depend as to whether or not you can get an adequate identification of somebody, meaning knowing what their name is? Does a lot of that depend on how long the person leaves the card in the card reader?
Yes.
So did you have any instances that you saw where the card reader the ID was pulled out too quickly and you couldn't read the name?
Yes.
So ultimately, Detective, from what you've described, was a list provided to you of all identifiable persons who entered the Club Cure, who at least put their IDs in a manner in which it could be read between 10 p.m. and 3 a.m.?
Yes.
And approximately how many names are on that list, if you know?
I believe it's 147.
Did you do anything with that list of 147 people you knew to have been, at least presumably, present at Cure Lounge that night, July 16, 2012? Did you do anything to compare that list to the list you had from the Rhode Island Motor Vehicles
Yes.
Department? What did you do?
Literally went through the lists of names to see if there were any that matched.
And did any match?
No.
Detective Cummings, now we're into late summer, into the fall of 2012. What was the status of the investigation into the homicides of Daniel D'Abreu and Safira Furtado?
It was open but unsolved.
Now, Detective, I'm going to call your attention to June of 2013. Based upon information you received from an investigation in another jurisdiction, did that cause you to do anything relative to this investigation?
Yes.
What, if anything, did you do, and who, if anyone, were you attempting to identify and track movements of?
Based on this information that we received, we went back through everything to try to identify and track the movements of Aaron Hernandez.
And that was in June of 2013.
Yes.
And what was your first role that you took upon yourself or were directed by Sergeant Detective Sullivan to do relative to possibly finding Aaron Hernandez or finding more relevant footage than you had already found?
I was directed to go back through the Tufts Garage video.
And those are the two entrance and exit cameras for Tufts Garage?
Yes.
And how many hours of footage did you have of that?
For Tufts Garage, I want to say we may have had 5 or 6 hours.
And what did you do with that footage in June of 2013?
I watched it.
All of it?
Yes.
And when you watched all of it, did you ever observe anything that caught your attention?
Yes.
What did you see?
A silver SUV with Rhode Island plates.
And I'm placing on the screen Exhibit 187 at 2 seconds of that particular exhibit. And the time on the Tufts screen says 12:04. Do you recognize what's depicted in that photograph?
Yes.
And what is that?
It's a Toyota 4Runner with Rhode Island plates.
And that's what you observed from looking at the video in June of 2013.
Yes.
Did you observe any other silver SUVs with Rhode Island plates that fit the parameters of what you were looking for?
No.
And you watched the entire video?
Yes, sir.
And in watching the entire video, sir, did you again reacquaint yourself with the time in which the victim motor vehicle, the silver BMW, entered the garage?
Yes.
And is that the screen that I have stopped or paused now on the screen, Exhibit 187?
Yes.
And the silver SUV with the Rhode Island plates, you said entered at 12:14, at least according to the video, and the victim motor vehicle is apparently entering at 12:14. Is that accurate, sir?
The first SUV enters at about 12:04. About 10 minutes later, the victim's motor vehicle enters.
Now, Detective, from the video footage that you viewed in June of 2013 that you just described, were you able to determine the license plate of the silver SUV?
Yes.
And do you recall, Detective, were you able to obtain the license plate from the entrance or the exit of the vehicle, or both?
I believe you can only clearly see it when it enters.
Detective, calling your attention now to the very beginning of that screen, silver SUV with Rhode Island plates. What was the license plate that you were able to read from that?
635035.
Rhode Island plate?
It appears to be yes.
Now, Detective, did you attempt, after seeing that motor vehicle, I assume you took down the license plate number when you reviewed it?
Yes.
Did you then try to see if you could tie that motor vehicle to any particular individual from the video?
We ran the plate and saw who it came back to.
And the plate came back to where?
Jenna Leasing.
What is Jenna Leasing, if you know?
Jenna Leasing is part of the Jack Fox Toyota company.
Now, relative to the video footage, Detective, did you attempt to link any particular individual to operating or having some connection to that car back on July 16, 2012? From watching the video, did you watch the video?
You mean when I watched it in 2013?
Would you watch it in 2013? I'm sorry. Yes.
Yes.
And how did you do that? How did you link any particular individuals possibly operating that vehicle at that time?
Clothing.
And I'm placing on the screen again, Exhibit 187. We have a time on the video itself of 11 minutes and 21 seconds. The time on the Tufts camera is about 1:06:07. I'm stopping now. When you say clothing, tell us what, if any, significance the video that I have stopped at this point, what significance that had to you in the investigation.
The color and the design on the front of the shirt.
And did you know who the individual was who's depicted here on the right?
Yes.
Who was that?
Aaron Hernandez.
And did you take note of the color and design of his shirt?
Yes.
Did you also take note of the color and design of the shirt worn by the person with him?
Yes.
Did you know the identity of that person who was with him at that time in June of 2013?
At that time, no.
So when you watch the video, I've now forwarded to 11:36. Did you make any observations about the clothing that we see in this video here, sir?
Yes.
What did you notice?
The person driving appears to be wearing a gray-colored shirt with some sort of white on the front. The person in the passenger seat, rather, is wearing a yellow shirt.
And could you tell what Mr. Hernandez was wearing around his neck at this time? That appears to be dangling?
It appears to be a rosary.
Does it appear to be more than one?
He has two things around his neck,
And do these things around his neck appear to be braided of some sort?
braided or beaded.
And the hat design, did you notice the hat design that I just fast forwarded through?
I mean, it's a baseball cap, yes.
And does the baseball cap on Exhibit 187 appear to be light colored with a design of color on the front?
Yes.
Now, Detective, as part of the investigation, did you and other detectives make further attempts to determine where that car was and who it was being used by?
Yes.
And did that include detectives interviewing the owner of the company you just talked about, a man by the name Jack Fox?
Yes.
He's the owner of Fox Toyota?
He was at the time. I'm not sure if he still owns it, but he was at the time, yes.
And additionally, sir, at some point calling your attention to at or around June 26th, the year 2013, were you directed by other law enforcement, including your supervisor, to respond to a particular address in Connecticut?
Yes.
And where were you directed to respond to?
114 Lake Ave in Bristol, Connecticut.
And upon your arrival at 114 Lake Ave in Bristol, Connecticut, did you and other detectives of the Boston Police Department conduct a search warrant of that address?
Yes.
May I approach witness room?
You may.
Detective, I'm going to show you three photographs and ask you.
Judge, if they're disputed along, he can identify them, we'll stipulate to their admission.
Well, that's the three photographs we entered as next number of exhibits. Photographs for the record of 114 Lake Avenue. First photograph will be an exterior of the home. Second photograph, an exterior of the garage. And the third photograph, the garage door opened and a vehicle depicted.
Without objection and by stipulation, they're received.
189 to 191.
So just placing exhibit 189 on the screen, do you recognize what's depicted in that photograph?
Yes.
And what is that, sir?
It's the house located at 114 Lake Ave.
Do you know whose residence that was?
I believe it was Mr. Hernandez's aunt's residence, or his aunt or his cousin.
And what is the name of that family?
There was Tanya Cummings, I believe, who lived there at the time, and I'm not sure of his other aunt's name. I know we spoke to her very briefly.
The last name be Valderrama?
Yes.
Placing on the screen exhibit number 190. When you arrived at this scene, detective, was other law enforcement present?
Yes.
And what other law enforcement agencies were present?
I believe there's some Mass State Troopers there, and there were members of the Bristol, Connecticut Police Department.
And is it fair to state that, to your knowledge, at least what was conveyed to you, is that address had already been secured and searched by another agency prior to your arrival?
Yes.
And that was pursuant to a separate search warrant?
Yes.
And after you obtained a search warrant from the state of Connecticut, did you and other detectives and specialized personnel of the Boston Police Department enter the garage that we see depicted here on Exhibit 190?
Yes.
And it's fair to state this garage appears to have some white over are those windows?
Yes.
And one of the windows has wood and the others has something white on them?
Yes.
Did that appear to be paint of some sort?
Yes.
When you entered the garage at 114 Lake Avenue, placing on the screen Exhibit 191, did you observe what we see depicted in 191?
Yes.
Had you seen that vehicle before, at least on video?
Yes.
And when had you seen that?
I'm sorry,
When had you seen it, and what did you see it doing in the video?
That's the vehicle that enters and exits the Tufts garage.
And the license plate on the vehicle, was that the same license plate that you had previously noted and marked from watching the video in June of 2013 from the date of the homicide?
Yes.
Detective Cummings, at some point, you're going to place in at some point was that vehicle transported to the Boston Police Department headquarters?
Yes.
Placing on the screen exhibit number 184, is that a photograph of the car being loaded onto a flatbed truck to be taken to the Boston Police Department?
Yes.
And ultimately was a search warrant applied for and received for Boston Police personnel to now to process that vehicle once it arrived at the Boston Police Department?
Yes.
Now, Detective, following that processing of the motor vehicle, which is it fair to say that's a Toyota 4Runner,
Yes, sir.
year 2006?
Correct.
After the processing of the silver Toyota 4Runner 2006 with the license plate that we just saw, did you do anything with members of your squad relative to that Toyota 4Runner?
Yes.
What did you do?
We took that car back to the scene where the incident occurred, knowing where the video cameras were, and we conducted several passes of that on the video just to see or to make sure that that's a car that's depicted in the video.
So you performed test drives, you drove through the area of Tremont Street?
Yes.
And did you try to drive in the approximate area that you previously observed a certain vehicle traveling?
Yes.
And after doing as you described, almost a test drive of the vehicle through Tremont Street area, did you and other members of your homicide squad get video from both the Tufts floating plaza camera as well as certain video from Club Cure?
Yes.
Fair question, Your Honor?
You may.
Detective
We'll
Joey.
stipulate to this as well, so we'll go over.
Your Honor, that's at the CD that is dated July 9th, 2013. A test drive, a performed Toyota Drive test drive. Club Cure video will be entered as the next numbered exhibit.
191.
192.
192.
Now, Detective, calling your attention back to your initial view of the video that you did back in 2000. I'm sorry, actually, it would be your second view of the video in 2013. In addition to watching the garage video to determine the possible identity of the person in the silver SUV, did you also watch the exterior cameras of the Tufts Medical Center garage?
Yes.
And did you try to make note of or observe whether or not you saw a silver SUV pass by at any relevant times?
Yes.
I'm calling your attention now to video exhibit 187. As we're waiting here, sir, were you able to identify the two people we see on the screen here?
Yes.
And who was that?
Daniel Abreu and Safira Furtado.
I'm stopping at 20 minutes 49 seconds of exhibit 187. Time on the Tufts Medical Center garage of 2:18:28 a.m. Did you at least take note when you watch this video of the vehicle we see here?
Yes.
And generally describing what does that vehicle appear to be?
A silver SUV.
Forwarding the video now to 23 minutes 23 seconds of exhibit 187 or 2:21 a.m. on the Tufts Medical Center garage camera. Did you observe something in this footage that you saw?
Yes.
What did you observe?
A silver SUV.
And the person's now standing on the corner of the entrance to the Tufts Medical Center garage with whom, sir?
Gerson Lopes and Rashidi Sanchez.
Now, back in June of 2013, Detective, when you examined this footage, were you able to see where that silver SUV went or where it may have parked, at least back then?
No.
And at some point, Detective, upon further review, approximately 4 months later, were you able to see where that vehicle parked?
Yes.
And when you were able to do that, had you just spoken to a certain individual?
Yes.
Who had you spoken to?
Alexander Bradley.
And on the video here, 2:21:23, the area where I have the cursor, is that an area of significance
It's
as far as where the vehicle may have parked?
yes.
And from the video we see here with brake lights on, does that appear to be where the silver SUV parked?
Yes.
And did you have any idea of that information when you were reviewing the video back in July through September of 2012?
No.
Now, Detective, calling your attention to some additional investigative work that you did based upon information received from an investigation in another county. Did you become aware of a possible rental car company that Mr. Hernandez used?
Yes.
What was the name of that rental company?
Enterprise.
And relative to learning that Enterprise Rental Company was an entity that Mr. Hernandez rented cars from, did you obtain records from Enterprise Rental Car?
Yes.
Fair approach, witness, Ron?
You may.
Right, I believe by agreement we would seek to enter the 63 pages of Enterprise Rental Car records subject to redaction.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
They will be received.
Is it 193?
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Detective, I'm going to show you a board, just ask you if you recognize that, sir.
Yes.
Does that appear to be a fair and accurate representation of the calendar? Sorry, this is February 12th. Do you recognize this, sir?
Yes.
Does that appear to be a fair and accurate representation of the calendar for the years July, from the month of July 2012 through June of 2013?
Yes.
Your Honor, this be marked for identification.
CC?
Excuse me. I'm sorry, did you say no objection?
No objection.
Detective Cummings, I'm going to place a page from what's been entered as Exhibit 193 on the screen. Can you see that there, sir?
Yes, sir.
And according to the records of what this exhibit shows, is there an indication that Mr. Hernandez rented a car on a certain date and a certain time?
Yes.
And what is that date and what is that time that the defendant, Aaron Hernandez, according to these records that have been entered as an exhibit, rented a car?
July 17th, 2012,
At what time?
9:59 a.m.
And calling your attention to the last marked board for identification, when is that date in relation to the homicide of Daniel DeAbreu and Secure Pratap?
It's the next day.
Now, Detective Cummings, is it fair to state that after the dates we've talked about, you continued to assist in the investigation into the homicides over the next number of months and years?
Yes, sir.
And were you present for interviews with various witnesses, and did you conduct interviews with various witnesses?
Yes, sir.
The other individual that I showed you in the video footage with the forerunner back from footage that was taken on July 16, 2012, you indicated that you did not know his identity at that point. Was that correct?
Correct.
At some point, did you learn that individual's identity?
Yes.
And what was his name?
Alexander Bradley.
And were you present for numerous interviews of Alexander Bradley?
Yes.
And calling your attention to the video where you determined that the shirt matched that of Aaron Hernandez, and Aaron Hernandez was the driver of the silver SUV on July 16, 2012. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
When was the first time that you received investigative information other than Aaron Hernandez being the driver of that car?
I believe the first time we spoke to Alexander Bradley.
And you had no knowledge of anyone else driving the car until you heard that from Alexander Bradley?
Correct.
Thank you, Detective. I have no further questions.
All right, let's take our morning recess. We'll resume at 11:30.
All right.